George Washington was a very prominent Mason. He was very well thought of, father of our country, and so on and so forth. And the Masons have kind of used him as a icon of what you should be as a Mason. One of the greatest things that he did was he refused power. And there aren't very many people, as you get older, you're going to notice that ever will turn down power. The Masons have a statement that says we make good men better.
In the end, we don't just make men better, we make them Masons. Not just a man, a Mason.
And the whole concept behind the Masons is that all of us human beings are made up of two parts. We have our physical bodies and we have our character. And you will see people go to the gym every day and work very hard on their physical bodies, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. I've been an active participant in physical activity all my life. Okay, but we all know at the end of the day that our physical bodies are going to degenerate and eventually die. But the other part is our character. And our character, quite often we don't work on nearly as much as we do our physical bodies. And so the idea behind the Masons is to teach a man how to be of good character. That's the concept behind Masonry. It's like going to the gym for your physical bodies. Coming to Masons is for your character. The Masons have been with us ever since the flood. People can call it a myth or not, but Masons believe that God put man on earth 4,000 years prior to the coming of Jesus Christ. When Adam was booted out of the Garden of Eden, he was booted out and he retained a lot of knowledge in geometry. And geometry is the mathematics that builds things. And so he dispersed that knowledge to other people. Well, man didn't do a really good job morally at handling himself. And so eventually we came to the Great Flood. In the Great Flood, everything was wiped out. Everything was killed except for Noah, his wife, and his 3 children and their wives. Prior to the flood, the Masons believed, now this is all mythology, but the Masons believed that there were 2 pillars built in what is currently Syria. And on those 2 pillars were written all of the instructions or all of the information needed to pass geometry on to the next generation. That is where current modern day Masonry started. And the information that was on those pillars was gathered by Shem and Japheth and Ham, and they carried it and dispersed it to other people. The Tower of Babel came in place. They decided that they were going to not obey God's orders to disperse across the globe, and they were going to build this edifice using their Masonic skills. Well, God ended that by changing their language, the language of everybody. They were confused by tongues, which interestingly enough, the Masons believe that's when a lot of the Masonic symbols and signs and handshakes and so on and so forth came into being, because it was the only way people could communicate anymore. Once they dispersed, one of the sons took people with him to Egypt, and we know what was built there, all the great pyramids. Another one went to Asia, and we know what was built there in terms of the Wall of China and other edifices, and one stayed in the Middle East. And we know what was built there, the Hanging Tower of Babylon, Tower of Diana at Ephesus in Turkey. And so all of these folks dispersed, and that knowledge went with them. And eventually that knowledge made its way into Europe. And during the Middle Ages, that's knowledge was used to build all the Gothic cathedrals that we see throughout Europe. But as the English came over to America, they brought lodges with them, the information. And America set up its own lodge system separate from England, just like we ended up setting up our own country separate from England. We were a rather independent group of people. Masonic lodges moved west as Americans moved west off the eastern seaboard and settled the country. And so this particular lodge was settled in 1852, and we're Hillsdale Lodge number 32. And what that number 32 means is that we were the 32nd lodge founded in Michigan. And to be founded, you have to be approved by the Grand Lodge. Quite often back in those days when the area was settled and new people were coming in, very prominent people in the community, prominent businessmen, politicians, religious leaders would join the Masons because it was a way to interact with other people in the community. The Masonic Lodge was a way for people to get together once or twice a month and talk about issues in the community and things that needed to be done and how to advance the economic interests of the community and how to take care of any kind of problems or issues that might arise. We've donated money to different Little League teams, some in North Adams, a couple of times down to Camden, down to Waldron. We offer scholarships to kids, primarily to sons and daughters of Masons. When everybody was struggling with COVID, we had some members that lost their jobs and were really struggling to meet their payments, and we contributed money to them so that they could pay for their mortgages and take care of health issues. So we do a lot of things like that to try to help people out when they're down and out. And there are Masonic lodges in almost every country. Here in the United States, each state has their own what they call Grand Lodge or state organization. There's not a national organization. The closest thing to a national lodge would be the George Washington National Memorial out in Alexandria. The Masonic lodges across the United States raised money back in 1923. That's when the cornerstone was set, and built this monument to George Washington. And the reason for that is that George Washington was a very prominent Mason. He was very well thought of, father of our country, and so on and so forth. And the Masons have kind of used him as a icon of what you should be as a Mason. One of the greatest things that he did was he refused power. And there aren't very many people, as you get older, you're going to notice, that ever will turn down power. People will fight dramatically for power. Those who are humble enough to give it up willingly are the kind of people that you want leading your country. Just this past February, I went out to it. They had a reenactment of the laying of the cornerstone, because it's 1923, so it's been 100 years. There's a beautiful monument of George Washington inside, and there's two beautiful murals inside. One is of the cornerstone laying for the Capitol building, which was carried out and christened with Masons. There's a whole process that the Masons go through to christen the cornerstone of new buildings if they're asked to do so. Our leadership in this country looked upon the Masonic Lodge as an exemplary moral society that could teach them proper conduct and proper ways, not only to handle themselves, but to help run the country. So I think that's why a lot of them joined. Now, Harry Truman, when he was president, he enjoyed very much going back to Missouri and going to his local lodge, because when you walk into the lodge, once the door is shut, everybody's equal. There's no presidents, there's no Bill Gates, there's nobody. For people who are quite important, it's very humbling to be put in that position, but it's good for them. And for people who are common everyday workers, it's very humbling to be in the presence of such people and find out that they put their pants on just like I do, one leg at a time. And so it's a society that can bring people from all aspects of our society into one equal level playing field. And that's the way it should be.